Welcome to Momming as a Millennial, the podcast where we explore the intersection of tradition and modern parenting. Have you ever felt overwhelmed trying to balance being a mom with your professional aspirations, all while dealing with side-eye from your parents who think you're doing it wrong? Me too. I'm your host, Christine Gerizzo, a journalist, blogger, and proud mama of 2 young children. I'm so glad you're here with me. Together, we can navigate the complexities of millennial motherhood and find what resonates with our true, authentic selves. Let's dive in. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This is part 2 of our conversation with Mandy Kraska. We're excited to dive right back into what we were talking about, so let's get to it. The next thing I wanted to talk about was your experience teaching. So having that director or that thinker personality trait, how that plays into your role as a teacher. I know you're currently teaching grades 9 to 12, and that's a difficult age, in my opinion. So are there certain things that you do in the classroom or with your students that stem from your personality, or, do you hold them to high standards like you hold yourself to? Like, how does that play?
Yeah, I would say definitely high expectations for all of my kids. I don't care who they are, where they came from, how much English they have, but that also looks different per student, right? So I don't have the same expectation for this student who's been here for 5 years, and has this proficiency level as I would a newcomer, right? And high expectations looks different depending on the kid too, right? As long as I know that they're giving their best and that they're trying and that's the best they can do, then I'm okay with that. But I like that they know that my expectations, are high. And sometimes that comes off as tough love because additionally, I teach a couple like AP college courses.
Oh.
So it's actually like college and high school. So I run it more like a college course than I do a high school course. And so the kids know right away the expectations are high. We're holding you to expectations that you are going to be held in next year if that's what you decide, to do. But also in life.
Yeah.
Handing things in on time, being on time to class. And, that could be a whole other conversation for a different day. But yeah, so definitely high expectations. I mean, my room is always put together. It's always clean. Our custodial staff is always like, we never have to do that much in here. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because I'm with my broom, anytime there's something on the floor. But again, like the expectation, if you need to have a snack because you're hungry, fine. You have a water bottle with you, great. But it's going in the recycling or the trash. I don't want to see it on my floor. And then when I do, everything has a spot. So it's like, you want to use this? You go right ahead. Just make sure you put it back where it goes. You want to borrow a book? Amazing. Sign it out. Please make sure you bring it back because there's thousands of dollars of things, in my room, but they're here for you. So I think also like my support, obviously as a teacher who works with kids who speak a language other than English, there's a different kind of support that has to be provided opposed to maybe another type of student. And so a lot of times I'm a counselor, I'm a social worker, I'm a caseworker. So I like to follow through too for them, for their families. And so I'm doing a lot of extra things that technically aren't my job. Sometimes even, doing special ed stuff because it's not being followed through on the other end or, whatnot. And it's me wanting to help them, but it's sometimes them asking for help. And then I'm like, well, yeah. Right? Goal-oriented. You need help? I'm going to get you help, and then I'm focused on doing that and tasks being completed, right?
Yeah.
Like the routine. So when you walk in the room, you know that you're, doing this. But high schoolers are just big kids. They're still kids. They're just big kids and they need routine. A lot of them don't have that at home, for several reasons. So I think they may never admit it. But the high expectations, the routine, the seeing me every day, knowing I'm there and this is what's going to happen, I think a lot of them secretly love it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just like our littles do. Just like they need it or it's tantrum city.
Yeah,
so
it's comforting.
Yeah, it definitely rolls over. It might look a little bit different, but not at the same time. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. And you answered the next one in that statement too. Wow, you're killing it.
Sheesh.
Okay, so I'm going to share something that's kind of embarrassing.
Okay.
So my son started getting homework this past year, and it was super challenging for me to take a step back. And I was really surprised at how immediately invested I got in this, to the point where I would stand there with him, like stand there over his shoulder almost, and be like super annoying, or like sit next to him. And he was doing it, and I would say, do you want to go back and maybe look at, like, that's a little messy, or are you rushing, or things like that, or did we do that properly? And like, I want to say it was 3 weeks into the school year, and I was like, wow, I am really annoying. And I could see that he was reacting negatively to that, and then he was getting upset, or maybe, thought I'm doing it wrong and I'm not impressing my mom, and now my teacher's not going to like this. And honestly, it's kind of a low point for me to admit that, but I really had to chill out and take a step back and just remove myself from the situation and say, whatever he's going to do is great. He would ask me to like check his answers, and I would do that and like leave it at that. But I really struggled with that. And I was absolutely surprised that I could put that kind of anxiety on him when, it was like I was back in school and I wanted it to be perfect. And I was putting that on him, and I absolutely do not want to be that mom. So I had to kind of pull back. But I'm interested if you can relate to that. You don't have to admit it, 'cause like I said, that's kind of embarrassing. And, are you harder on achievement, like when it comes to your kids or your students, or is it equal? What do you think?
No, I'm over here smirking because homework is like the bane of my existence.
It's the worst.
So I swear if they set our houses together and ripped off the front, they would look exactly the same, because homework time is like a high stress situation or part of our day. Yeah, same thing. I'm like, ugh. Maybe like shouldn't go the line. It's not quite straight. Yeah. And she would end up getting upset. And with my oldest, she's an eloper. So she likes to run off. So then that catapults into a whole other situation. Yeah. And also, I think because my oldest has the speech language delay and all of that. So she struggled for, a long time. And she's thriving now. Don't get me wrong. She's doing wonderfully. But I want her to do well, and I want her to know the right answers and know how to do it. I never want to leave her on her paper with the wrong answer, because at this age, the kids don't get those homework papers back and look at the feedback and are like, oh, I need to fix that next time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
so like,
true.
I have this fear. And not that she can't do it on her own, or that she won't get it eventually, or that she's not smart, because she's ridiculously smart. But I think I just have this fear because of everything I had to go through to get her the services she needed and to get her where she is now. And we had a rough kindergarten year and all this stuff, that I just worry, like, am I doing enough to make sure that she can be successful? But then it doesn't translate that way. Like you were saying, It ends up being, I'm too much. I'm over her shoulder. Yes. I'm stressing her out. She's not going to complete it. We try to erase, and then it rips because that paper is the worst. And
all those things.
Yes. So I have tried to change my approach. I've tried to like let her do it herself, or, or I'll take out a sheet from earlier in the day, where they have these big books that have examples.
Okay.
So I'll like keep that close too, just in case. So I've tried to adjust. You are definitely not the only person who struggles with homework, but I do think a lot of it does stem from, I always did well in school.
Yes.
And I always want to do well, like I was saying earlier. I do everything 110%. It's got to be right. And if it's not, then I'm going to fix it, And she's, like I said, she's becoming her own perfectionist. So it's kind of like that for her too. But yeah, it's a struggle. She is often like, oh, that's a teacher 5. So there's that perfectionist on her end, where like she wants her numbers to look a certain way and things like that. But then sometimes she doesn't. And then homework time becomes this whole big thing. Because then you're also frustrated sometimes with like, how don't you get this?
Yeah.
Like, because my oldest will do that sometimes. I'm like, if I just asked you what this number plus this number is, you could tell me. But because I'm adding a word after it, you're giving me like 55. It's like 3 plus 2. Yeah. Homework time is difficult. And I think the ages that they don't understand the value in homework. And that's a debatable topic all on its own, right?
So I'm wondering if there is value in the homework he was getting.
Yes. So it's like, is it worth me hyping over when at the end of the day they're getting all this practice in school? She's not going to be 25 and not know how to give someone money at the store. Like, I'll make sure she can do that. You know what I mean? That's the other thing, is like trying to look forward. Yeah. Like, okay, if she has this wrong answer on here, is she going to be 25 and not know how to add? Like, I think she'll be okay. So, like, let's let it go. Plus, we're doing homework after having worked all day.
Yes.
And then coming home, you're trying to get right into the routine, but you've got one who's in this routine and one who's doing homework routine. And I think that is also it, too. Then dinner, who's, you know, it's multitasking. And sometimes type A people like us can do that very, very, very well. And then sometimes it becomes overwhelming or overstimulating. And it's
depending on what kind of day.
Much. Yeah.
You made a point about how they don't get that homework back, so they don't see if the answer is wrong or right. And that I can relate to. When we got all of his stuff back at the end of the year, so like his journals and stuff, and, you know, they do inventive spelling, and he would go through it and ask me, is this spelled correctly? And then when I would say, like, you're so close, but maybe you missed a letter or you have the wrong letter in there, and he would get so upset, because probably creating a little perfectionist myself, you know, so upset that he didn't have the right answer and that, like, no one had told him that he didn't have the right answer. And I don't know the thought process behind that sort of teaching, and do they intentionally not tell them? Is it helpful for them to do that inventive spelling before they need to know how to spell it properly? I don't know.
Yeah, it's all part of like the developmental process, I would say. So like, for example, one of my daughter's goals on her IEP is to be able to use like nonsensical words.
Okay.
And so I would think like this inventive spelling is a similar, I guess, goal, so that they're practicing sounding things out, you know, like writing things phonetically, and, you know, all
usually matches phonetically really well.
Which is good. Yeah. The problem is that English is such a complex language that, you know, there's an exception to the exception to the exception. Yeah. So, which I'm running into a lot with my youngest. And so then that also is a whole thing when we're doing sight words. She's like, but you told me. And I was like, oh, man, I know.
Yeah.
That rule doesn't apply here.
Right? How do you explain that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have my other one who, like, purposely says the wrong thing because she thinks she's funny. And I'm like, nobody's going to appreciate that you can't answer this question. I know you know that. So,
yes, they do think that. Yeah, very different. That's going to be my youngest. My youngest, he's my whippersnapper.
Yep.
Like, my middle is super calm and collected, and everything just kind of comes naturally to her. So she's not type A and perfectionist like I think my oldest is and is going to be. Things just kind of come to her, and she's just like, yeah, like she just does well, and that's it. And she just keeps going, you know, and a little bit more like my husband and the sort of even-keeled personality. And then my third, well, I mean, he's still very young, so we'll see where that goes, but he's already wild, so
yeah,
we'll
I can
how
relate.
that translates.
Can relate to that.
Come school age. Oh, my goodness.
Well, I read an article about the importance of stepping back and letting kids take the lead, and along with all that homework talk. But it cited a study from 2021, and that was published in the Journal of Family Psychology. And it found that sometimes it could be counterproductive when parents intervene too much. You know, shocking. I mean, makes sense.
Right.
But this particular study looked at kindergarten-age children who were playing, cleaning up toys, learning a new game, or maybe talking about a problem. And they found that children were negatively impacted when their parents stepped in more often to help. And actually, as a result, these kids struggled with regulating their emotions and behavior and performed worse on tasks that involved executive functions, like as they got older. So the capacity to plan ahead and meet goals and, you know, display self-control and all that. So the parents who stepped in to help with those types of things were actually hindering their ability to learn how to do those types of things. So I'm curious, you know, again, as an educator, how do we teach our kids to be more independent and learn things on their own, fail, let them know that that's okay? Like, what tips do you have for that?
You know, I think that's a hard one because, for example, I'm a little bit more on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z than you are.
Barely.
I mean, barely, but still. But like, you know, with us growing up, we were outside way more.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And we were getting dirty and we were riding our bikes to the store on our own. We weren't worrying about all of these things, you know? And our parents, we might have left them a note or called them at work, particularly in the summer or something, or like, hey, I'm going 3 blocks down to so-and-so's house, right? Nowadays, that doesn't happen very often. And so here we all are.
Yeah, alive.
Or alive and maybe not thriving or doing well. So
True.
I think that's a tricky question. I'm sure that's true, right? Like Montessori is the whole new big thing and stuff, gentle parenting and letting them do their own thing. And actually, my brother and his wife are really, really wonderful at allowing their children to be like as independent as possible, letting them choose their own clothes and all of that. And my niece and nephews are great kids. They're all going to be very smart and talented. This comment has nothing to do with them in particular at all. But in the same breath, I also think that can be counterproductive. You know what I mean?
To an extreme.
If you're all about that independence and you don't chime in at some point to help them get through that, and they're not learning it on their own, are they missing out on something, right? I think there's value in all different types of parenting. I think it depends on who you are and how you're treating your kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can be a helicopter mom and overbearing. I am not a balanced mix of those, but I think there is worth.
You're not a balanced mix of helicopter and
gentle parenting, let them be independent. I'm not a balanced mix.
Okay.
I am cognizant of it.
Yeah.
I try to notice when maybe I need to step back, but I'm not always great at it. Particularly as they get older too, right? They need to sort of figure out the world and everything. But is it important for these kids to have all of these skills? Yeah. That's how we function in society. That's how we become functional adults and human beings and how we get to work on time.
Right.
So as a teacher, I'm always talking about real world skills. And more recently, with my kids getting a little bit older, I'm doing the same with them too, because it's like, you aren't just here to learn how to add or how to write an argument. Like, let me tell you about why you need to know how to write an argument and how it translates into the real world. And so I've started doing that with my older two, with like little things, but also big things at the same time, like with problem solving or something.
Yeah.
If they can't figure it out, I'm like, this action is not solving the problem. In fact, it just made the problem worse. You need to find a way to make the problem better.
Yeah.
That's how things work, and I'll relate it to something that they can understand. Do I do that all the time? No.
Well, no, yeah.
All of those skills are definitely important, and not all kids have them, but not all adults have them either.
True.
And I think it's also a combination. It's not just parenting. I think it's what they hear and what they see and who they're around and what their lives are like. And who knows, with all the technology that these kids have, like what that's going to look like when all of these kids are adults.
Yeah.
But I do know that being a high school teacher, that kids are struggling going into college. I mean, some of like the most talented, smartest, capable kids are struggling moving into college because of procrastinating, because of thinking that they can hand stuff in whenever they want, because they don't need to get to class on time or they don't need to go to class at all. Because in some districts, some kids, some schools, that's how it goes. And some are going to persevere through that and some aren't. But I just think it's a combination of things. Can parents help it? Sure, but that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I knew you were going to bring an interesting perspective being an educator, and you kind of just, shine some light on things that I hadn't considered. And this brings me into my final thought, because what I'm thinking about when I ask that question, I'm not going to help them zip up their coat or tie their shoes, So some of the things that I'm working on, not helping them with everything.
Yeah.
So when they get stuck, thinking of getting dressed in the morning, if they're doing a puzzle and they can't figure out where a piece goes, or if they're trying something new on the playground, like not rushing over and giving them that out. Or even if they ask me for help, like, no, you go ahead and try it first. So I'm thinking more on that level, which seems to have such lower stakes, I guess. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that?
I don't know. Probably. I mean, now I'm realizing like how helicopter mama.
It's a struggle.
I mean, it is, yeah. But then again, I'm also thinking about my kids. You know, my kids want help. My kids ask for help. And that doesn't mean that then they can't do something independently later on. You know, my kids, they want to cuddle. They want me to be near. They want me to do this. But they can, I think that's the important thing. For me, I'm just thinking almost out loud right now. I think that it's okay for me to do some of what I'm doing as long as the goal. So, for example, you mentioned getting dressed, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay for me to help them get dressed as long as they can also get dressed on their own.
Right.
And so I think I need to have that mentality all of the time to make sure that if I am getting involved in something, that they've gotten the chance to master that skill or have already mastered it.
Right.
And then I'm also thinking I feel rushed all of the time, partly because I hate being late.
Yeah.
And also because it's often just me with 3 kids. And there are many times where I'm like, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it because it's easier because we're already running late. And if I wait for A, B, and C to do what I need them to do, we're going to be late or later than we already are. Man, I'm also realizing that to think about all of this stuff all of the time, because I do think about it, but like to think about all of the things all of the time is also really overwhelming and exhausting. So it's not just like, oh, should I get involved here? Should I not get involved? Right. But if I get involved, have they already mastered this skill? Have they done this before? You know what I mean? And you can't think about all of those things in the moment. You know?
Yeah, 100% not suggesting that at all. I totally...
no. I don't
totally agree with you.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that about running late, too, because I've noticed I'll do that also. You know, like my daughter wants to zip up her own coat, and I'm like, well, we got to go, so I'll just do it real quick. And it's just me in the mornings, too. My husband goes to work super early, so we're always trying to get out the door. But I've noticed that if I say, we're going to be late or we're running late, my oldest gets anxious. And then he's like, oh, my gosh, are we going to be late? Are we going to miss this? Are we going to miss that? What's going to happen? And so I really try not to say those things, like even though maybe my body language isn't hiding it well, but I try not to say we're going to be late because that just domino effect.
Yeah, I probably should try to stop.
I mean, it's not like when you're in that moment and you're stressed and I am fortunate that I work from home. You have to actually be in a building. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm lucky so this is when the swing shift works because my husband can do things in the morning when he's on nights because he doesn't have to be in. But then there's a couple days every other week where I have to get all 3 of them woken up, dressed, breakfast, myself put together and everything. So it's just a lot. I'm wondering too, though, like as we're talking, that based on what kind of person you are and parent, that maybe one or the other like works better. I'm just kind of trying to think about, for example, like my sister-in-law. Like she's just a very like calm, genuine, sweet person. And so she's really good at that gentle parenting. She also has a lot of patience, which is not something I have. I adore her and we get along fabulously, but we're very different in those ways. I don't have patience. I mean, I think I'm kind and genuine, but I'm not patient and I try to gentle parent when I can. But anyway, all of that to say, I mean, she's just really good at that, you know? And that's not my strong suit at all. And I'm okay in admitting that. And that's partly because my type A or B, C, and D personality, I'm now an X, you know? But I think it depends. And now it sort of has me wondering, like, how would my kids respond if I was a straight up gentle parent? Like, it's not that I don't ever gentle parent, but would they respond the same?
Well, that's what I was going to say as you were speaking about your sister-in-law. Like, how do the kids respond to her? Because really it comes down to what the kids are taking from your actions and what you're saying.
Right.
And I know that my kids would walk all over me if I was trying to gentle parent all the time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, I know that I am making my oldest anxious when I'm too, you know, high strung about something.
Right.
So it's kind of finding that balance.
Yeah. I mean, and that's probably what it is for everything parenting is just finding the balance. But finding the balance can be really difficult too. Yeah. You know, especially if you are someone like us. It's hard. I'm also fast paced too.
Yeah.
And my husband is not. Everything, you know, he's like Eeyore. and where I'm just like, all right. And sometimes that's in your face. Like you were talking about homework, because that's me too. I'm like, can we just get this done?
Yeah.
Like you're sitting here upset because whatever, we could have had this done 5 minutes ago. You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, you probably shouldn't say things like that to your kid. So there are parts of my type A or combination of personality that I think do need to like simmer down a little bit. And hopefully with age for us or for me, that happens. Also, as they get older, when they're the ages that our kids are right now, they are dependent on you for a lot of things. They can do a lot, sure, but there's still a lot that we have to do. And as they get older, my oldest, she's my helper. She probably is tired of it sometimes, you know what I mean? But because she's the oldest and she's at an age where she can help and do things, I can ask her to do those things.
Yeah, I find myself doing the same with my oldest. Like, can you grab this? Can you help her with that?
Right. And that's a whole new topic that people are talking about too. And I'm like, oh man, because I was not the oldest. My brother is older than I am. So I don't know what that's like to be asked to help your sibling.
I was the youngest and I was asked to help with everything. So,
well, that sounds right.
Another reason why I'm the way I am.
Yeah.
Well, this is great. I think I'm going to wrap us up here. I said my final thought, but really what it boils down to for me is just like having compassion for yourself. And, we're doing a great job, and give grace all around to us, the kids. Yeah.
And to every personality type.
Yeah.
And to every mom and dad and everyone who's parenting, because it's hard.
It is hard.
It is so hard. Yeah. And there's just too many things nowadays that are part of the equation that maybe just weren't when we were growing up,
Exactly. And the basis of this podcast, like, it is a different world.
Yes.
For sure.
100%.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
So
thanks for having me. This was fun.
It. Thanks for tuning in to Momming as a Millennial. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend or on social. You can find more from me at contemplativemama.com. Until next time.